Hi there guys, welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host, Simon Conboy. This week I'm doing a series of 10-year franchise reviews. This episode will be focusing on the Baltimore Ravens. So for this I'm going to just analyse their record over the last 10 years, any coaching changes, of course not many in Baltimore, they've been a pretty stable franchise, as well as breaking down the last 10 years worth of draft picks. I will explain how I'm doing that once I get to that section of the video. So beginning with the team's record, in the last 10 years they've amassed a 90 wins and 70 losses, which is pretty good winning record overall. They've had 2 division titles in that time frame, 1 Super Bowl win and 6 playoff appearances. In that time they've had only the 2 head coaches, Brian Billick for the last of these years and then John Harbaugh since. Pretty stable, 2 losing seasons, a pair of 8-8s every other year they've made the playoffs. So they've been, pretty much stable, top tier kind of franchise in that time frame. And let's see if their drafting reflects that. So what I'm doing for these, I'm evaluating the first 3 rounds, every pick they've made for the last 10 years, and saying whether I believe they were a solid pick, in which case the team scores +1. If they're a mediocre pick, score of 0, and if they're a flat out bust, -1. Grading first round picks a bit more harshly. For rounds 4 through 7, due to so few players actually making any kind of impact in the league, any that do will be deemed a value pick and give a score of +1. So, beginning with the 2007 draft, the first round pick for the Ravens was Ben Grubbs, the 2-time Pro Bowl guard. Good player. Solid pick, was on that line for a number of years, formed a really good tandem with one of their future picks. That's a really good pick, can't argue with that one. In the third, Yamon Figurs, wide receiver, did nothing. I think he played returner for a little bit. He goes down as a bust. In the third, Marshall Yanda. There you go. There was his line mate. Home run pick, 2-time All-Pro, 6 Pro Bowls. Arguably the top guard in the NFL over recent years. Fantastic player. That's an absolute home run. That's one of the easiest ones I've had to do in the third round in particular. He'd be in a top 10 pick and he'd go down as a home run. Superb player. And in the fourth, Laron McClain, who actually was a pretty good fullback and backup running back for a while, he has to go down as a value pick. So this is one of the better drafts. This may be featured at the end of the week in my weekly review. I'm going to do my 10 favourite draft classes and my least favourite. This one may be a contender for my favourites. The 2008 draft, so Joe Flacco, the quarterback at 18, have to say it's a solid pick. I don't think he's one of the absolute top quarterbacks in the league, but he's certainly a solid starter. The franchise is happy to have him and he's won a Super Bowl, so that goes down as a solid pick. This one's a bit of a mixed bag. Ray Rice was a very good runner other than that last year with the Ravens, and then of course there was the incident that he was involved in. I'm not going to discuss that here. Regardless of what you think of that, has to go down as a solid pick. He was a very good player for this franchise. In the third, Tavares Gooden, the linebacker, has done nothing. That goes down as a bust. Third, Tom Zibikowski, provided a bit of depth. It's maybe a bit of a harsh bust, but I'm giving it a bust. Didn't do enough for a third rounder for me. And O'Neal Cousins, the guard, has provided depth for a while. Not really done too much. He's going to go down as mediocre for me. The Zibikowski one might be harsh. I might bump their grade up by 1 rather than have him as a bust. I'm not sure. The 2009 draft, we've got Michael Orr at 23. He's a bust. Maybe mediocre, but I'm going with bust there. First round tackle not being good enough for me, even if he did play on that Super Bowl team. If he was in the second or third round, I'd probably be a bit more lenient, but for a first rounder, I've got to put him as a bust. Sorry, Aussie. In the second, Paul Kruger, the defensive end / outside linebacker. Solid player. Of course, went to the Browns on a pretty big contract, but that was a pretty solid pick. Had a good run in the playoffs the year they did win the Super Bowl. And in the third, Ladarius Webb, defensive back. That's a really good pick. He was a good player for them. So, reasonable draft there. In 2010, no first rounder due to the Joe Flacco trade. In the second, Sergio Kindle, the linebacker, he was a bust. I believe he got injured really badly in his second year and had to retire, if I remember rightly. Either way, didn't have an impact. Mount Cody, the nose tackle, bust, which is a shame because he's so huge. I thought he'd be really good, or at least I hoped. I like giant nose tackles. They're great. Ed Dixon, the tight ends, that goes down as mediocre in the third. But a couple of value picks here. Arthur Jones in the fifth and Dennis Pitter, the tight end, in the fourth. So those are two value picks for the Ravens. The 2011 draft, this goes down again as one of the contenders for the best list. We've got Jimmy Smith, the defensive back, 27. I didn't know he'd been in the league that long, but he's been a good player for them. In the second, Torrey Smith. I think he was solid in his time with the Ravens. Of course, fell off a bit with the Niners, but just for what he gave the Ravens for those years, this has to go down as a solid pick in the second round. And the third, Jar Reed, mediocre. He's been depth. Don't know whether to call him a bust. It's certainly plausible, but I'm going to be a bit generous with that one. A couple of value picks here. In the fifth, Pernell McPhee. Now with the Bears, he's turned into a really good player. They probably could have done with retaining him, actually. And in the sixth, Tyrod Taylor, the current starting quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Maybe, tough to give them a point for this because they haven't really benefited from it, but it is what it is. You can, again, if it really bothers you, subtract one from the Ravens' overall score at the end. And the 2012 draft, this was a tough one. Courtney Upshaw, the linebacker, he's been a bust. Kalichi Assembly, and these guys do a good job drafting guards. Obviously, CSI pick, had a great season last year with the Raiders, was very good in his time with the Ravens, replacing Ben Grubbs. So that absolutely goes down as a solid. And in the third, running back Bernard Pierce, this goes down as mediocre. He's done some bits. Don't think he's been poor enough to be a bust, but it's just a guy, really. The 2013 draft, this one got saved by one pick, otherwise this would be a contender for the worst. Matt Elam with the 32nd pick, the safety, clearly a bust. Even before his bust this off-season, he was likely to be cut anyway, I think. Very poor time with the Ravens. Arthur Brown, the linebacker, I thought he was a really good player. I thought he'd be great. I really liked this draft initially. Shows what I know sometimes. He has been a bust. In the third, Brandon Williams, who just signed a monster contract, the nose tackle. That goes down as a very, very solid pick. Good job there. In the fourth, Kyle Juszczyk. He goes down as solid. You got good value out of him. He's just signed with the Niners. And in the fifth, Ricky Wagner, the offensive tackle, who's just signed with the Lions. That goes down as another value pick. So whilst those first two picks were really, really poor, the three after worked out very well for this team. So that saves them. The 2014 draft, CJ Mosley, two-time Pro Bowler, inside backer. He goes down as a solid pick. He's been very good in his time in the league. Should continue to get better. Timmy Jernigan in the second, Florida State D lineman. He's been a solid player. Flies somewhat under the radar, but I think he's pretty good. Goes down as a solid. In the third, Terrence Brooks. I don't even think he's still with the team. I've got him down here as a bust. I'm a bit more generous with the last 3 years because a lot of these players, you can't necessarily say one way or the other at this point in time. So a lot of them will just be, zeros. Crockett Gilmore, the tight end, we don't know yet at this point, so nothing there. The 2015 draft, I may be being harsh here, having just said, I'm being a bit more generous, but I think this draft looks at the minute like a disaster. So we've got Bashard Perriman. When he has played, he's not been particularly effective. He's missed a lot of time with injuries. I've got him down as a bust, the 26th overall pick of that draft. In the second, Max Williams, the tight end, he's done absolutely nothing. And the opportunities have been there in Baltimore since he was drafted. I have to assume he's not been particularly good for them. So that's going as a bust at this point. Carl Davis, the defense tackle, in the third. He's done nothing. I'm actually going to strike that one. I'm not going to put that as a bust because it's third rounder and I don't know. Although I did put bust, he might not be on the roster. But I'll strike that one as a bust. But this looks like a very poor draft thus far. And last year, Ronnie Stanley with a 6th overall pick. I think he's been solid. Had a pretty good rookie season, so he goes down as a solid pick.
In the second, Correa. And in the third, how do you say Kagzusi? Undecided on those two at this moment in time. So, of course, the Ravens have a great reputation for being fantastic at drafting. So what I've got here are 8 solid picks, 4 I've deemed great, 1 home run, they're still all +1s, and 7 value picks. So the value picks are really where this team has stood out. That's a very good score. Some of those players as well have gone on to be fantastic players. So do a great job in the later rounds. There have been 12 busts. We'll knock that down to 11. So that gives them a total of +9. So that's a good score. That 15 draft hurts them. Not being quite as effective in the last few years. A few busts there. The 14 and 15 drafts have really hurt this score. Anything in double digits is very, very good, and they're not far off of that. First round picks, they've had 8 in total. 5 of them have been solid players. 3 of them have been busts. That's not a bad ratio. If you're above 50-50, you've done an okay job there. So, yeah, the Ravens, was surprised how low the score was. I was expecting it to be a bit higher, but then I sort of looked a bit further back, and of course it doesn't count towards this, but the drafts before that were ones where Ozzy was nailing it left, right and centre compared to other NFL franchises, and that gave them a lot of the base for that Super Bowl win. Been pretty solid since. They say those 2 drafts have really knocked down their score. I have noticed that can be the case with this rating system. In 10 years, 1 or 2 really good or bad drafts can heavily skew things, but from the research I've done, I do think when you see the table at the end of the week, you will see hopefully a clear correlation. Not to give too many spoilers, but +9's a good score. They have drafted well, as I say. The value is really where it stands out. Clearly, they do a great job in those later rounds. They give these guys opportunities. I definitely think that's a contributing factor for some of these teams. What do you think? Do you think there's anyone I've been too harsh on, particularly that 2015 draft class? Just let me know. Twitter, Facebook page, the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to everybody who contacts me. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you have enjoyed it, check out some more of my videos. It'd be thoroughly appreciated. Check out the Patreon as well. That'd be cool. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this series thus far. Hope you found it as interesting as I do. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time, and go Bucks.